On today's episode, I'm joined by Vanessa Longley, Chief Executive of Chance UK. Chance UK is a leading children's charity dedicated to support children aged 5 to 13 with early intervention and mentoring programs. Since its founding in 1995, the organisation has focused on helping children who have experienced adversity and are at risk of developing emotional and behavioural challenges. By pairing each child with a trained youth worker, Chance UK provides tailored one-to-one support that builds self-esteem, confidence and hope, helping children find a sense of belonging and develop essential life skills. Beyond mentoring, Chance UK offers comprehensive support for families and offers school and group workshops. Chance UK also campaigned to effect change in policy to support all children across the UK and recently published a report on the devastating long-term impacts of primary school exclusions. Vanessa Longley is the Chief Executive of Chance UK, bringing over 25 years of senior leadership experience in healthcare charities, including her previous role as Director of Development at YoungMinds. Vanessa has been instrumental in leading initiatives to address the mental health crisis among young people, with a focus on amplifying youth voices and centering their experiences in advocacy and services. Vanessa is also a qualified bereavement counsellor and trustee for SignHealth and is deeply committed to the transformative power of early support. Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you.
So, first of all, could you tell me a bit about your previous experience and what was it that drew you to working for Chance UK?
Yeah, I've been working with children for a very long time. I have one of my own. And one of the things that I saw when I was at YoungMinds is that despite the fact that we were raising so much more money and delivering so many more services to so many more children and young people, the mental health crisis that we were seeing in this country, the numbers were just outpacing anything that YoungMinds could keep up with. And so I spent a couple of years because I couldn't believe that there wasn't something that works, something that gets and reaches children before they end up in a crisis. And Chance UK is one of only 2 charities I found in the UK who have an incredibly strong evidence base to show that the type of early intervention that we do works. It works not just in relieving difficulties in the moment, right now, but has a long-lasting effect into adulthood because we are supporting children to learn how to face and manage difficulties in this incredibly complex world that we have.
And what challenges do you think children are facing at the moment?
Well, it's an interesting one, and I come across people every day who tell me what the problem is with children these days. And 9 times out of 10, you can assume that the social media word comes up quite early. And I suppose the evidence we have shows something a bit different. The evidence that when we look at, and we can look at data going back decades, is that children aren't actually struggling any more than they used to. They are as distressed as they used to be. And they are as distressed by similar issues that they used to be. But the number of children that are struggling is just growing and growing and growing. So many, many more children are reaching that higher level of need than we had before. And what is it? Well, growing up's never been easy, but today's children are being asked to deal with so much more. And that means that children who perhaps in the past would have gone through childhood, requiring very little extra support, now we're seeing far more who really need more support in order to have a successful and happy childhood.
And are those some of the challenges that you were seeing at YoungMinds, the growth in number of children needing support?
Oh, absolutely, without doubt. I mean, we are having, it's an epidemic of mental health need amongst children, and that started way before COVID-19, but COVID-19 amplified issues. And part of that was there is the facing of the lockdown, of course, that had disproportionate impacts on some groups in society. And the more of the risk factors you had before COVID, the more you were likely to get impacted by the lockdowns that we had during COVID. But it's also the knock-on effects, which is services that children and young people would have accessed are under more pressure because of that time. The cost of living crisis has put more pressure on families. We are seeing much later diagnosis because specialist services are overwhelmed themselves. So what's happening is children are beginning to show difficulties. They are asking for help. And the services that are available are often saying, we can help in 18 months, in 2 years, in 3 years, which is a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And what we're beginning to start to see is this tracking through into all of those warning signs. If we look at the research that we did around exclusions, I mean, when you start seeing the exclusions of children aged 6 and under in schools rocketing, you know that this is a canary in the mines. This is our early warning sign that something is going to go very, very wrong unless we intervene. And that's Chance UK. That's the model that we use. We do not wait for children to reach crisis. What we do is, and it's not about necessarily identifying those children at highest need, which is what many organisations do. It's what all of our statutory services are doing at the moment. They're saying there's too many, so we'll focus on those who are most in crisis. Instead, we focus on earliest need, because that's where you can reduce and often totally avoid the crisis interventions that have to be done later on.
I love the story of how Chance UK was set up.
Yeah, local policeman.
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary man, someone who had a really deep and fundamental belief in community policing. And he used to go into primary schools and do the standard community policeman talk. And what he began to see over his career was he would start to see these kids who'd been great kids at 6, 7 and 8, all of a sudden start to enter into the criminal justice system at 16, 17, 18. And he would be talking to them, and there was this consistent story coming through. And the consistent story amongst these young people was that they felt very alone, that they felt disconnected from wider society, and they didn't have any adults in their life that they felt they could trust to tell them the truth, to guide them, to make them feel part of something. And that's where Chance UK came from. This idea that sometimes one trusted adult can be transformative in the life of a child.
Yeah. And you also mentioned the COVID pandemic and how that exacerbated especially problems and what we're seeing with the exclusions of under 6.
Yeah.
What do you think the long-term impact of the COVID pandemic has been on children, and especially that younger cohort?
Yeah, I think what we need to appreciate is that this isn't about an infection. That's a lot of the things that have happened have been a result of how we managed this crisis in health. What we need to remember is that for a lot of these children that we're seeing coming through into school now, at an absolute critical period of their development, they had little to no contact with other children, with other trusted adults. There's a family that we support who were in, they've been moved now. They were in a high rise in a 1-bedroom flat with 3 children. And physically, mum couldn't get the kids in and out of the flat because you can't do the stairs with 2 babies in a pushchair. So you are looking at some families, their experience of lockdown was absolute, total isolation. And I think it's a reminder for us that we as human beings are not designed to grow up in isolation. We need the community, we need the tribe to grow up well. And that's some of the long-term effects that we're seeing. So yes, we're seeing those that had a particularly bad time during a key part of their developmental stage, but it also meant that early issues weren't identified. So early speech and language difficulties, early mobility issues. So there are kids coming into school. I was talking to a teacher the other day, and she teaches 7 and 8-year-olds. And in her classroom are children who are not yet out of nappies, alongside girls who have started their periods, which is because that's early development is quite normal now. And she is absolutely committed to teaching. She loves and is absolutely committed to her class. but she came into teaching because she loves the joy of educating kids. And she is now spending the vast majority of her time on the health and well-being of her kids. So I think it's a really interesting shift, and teachers are often at the sharp end of that.
I think you mentioned something really interesting when you said those early developmental years were so critical. And in the lack of socialization, we're then expecting children to go back into school and not address the fact that they spent 2 years in isolation in a varying different situations. And then they're back into school and they're struggling, and schools are struggling, teachers are struggling. They may not necessarily have the resources to be able to deal with this. And that's, I guess, what we're seeing with the exclusions.
Absolutely. Exclusions are a symptom. And the kids that are getting excluded from school, certainly at primary school, what our research shows is, I think we all have an image, perhaps from our own school days, of the kids that get excluded, the naughty kids. That's not what's happening. Our research shows categorically that nearly every child excluded at primary school has a special educational need or disability. The vast majority are on free school meals, and a large number are considered part of a family at risk by social services already. These are our most vulnerable kids in school, and they are being excluded because the school environment at the moment isn't able to handle that. But here's the alternative. Rather than focusing on a point at where the school can no longer cope, what we know is if you intervene at the point of earliest need, when a child begins to have difficulties, then we know that it's absolutely possible to avoid these moments of crisis. So in our work, around about 80% of the children that we support improve their school attendance, and far, far higher numbers improve their behaviour at home and at school. So we know there's something we can do that works. What we do need to do is be able to do that more, because exclusion isn't the answer. All we are doing is sending children home into an environment where they're not getting the support that they need to develop and grow.
It's interesting. It's almost like we punish children for having an already more difficult start. And then that continues. I read the research and the long-term impacts. 90% of children who are excluded in primary school don't pass GCSE maths or English. And 64% of them become permanently absent in secondary school. So yeah, it's devastating, the impact. And it's also just changing the mindset of a child and showing them that school isn't where they should be, or telling them that maybe there's something wrong with them.
Absolutely.
When they're 5.
It's the most common thing that the children say to us when we start supporting them. They'll say, I've already messed up my life, or what's wrong with me? There's a lad that we support who has been excluded every single year of his school life. He's 10. Every year he's got excluded. And yet despite that, this is a lad who wants to be in school. And he says, I want to do better, but I don't know how. And it has taken in our case, Chance UK youth worker, to work with him over months to get to know him, to build trust, and to get him to believe that it is within himself. There is nothing wrong, just with the right support, and to be able to work with the school to put that support into place, he can thrive. He is different. He does, in his case, there is a special educational need or disability. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with him. It's learning to live and flourish in this incredibly complex and changing world that we have. And that's what childhood should be about. That's where Chance UK come in. It is about giving children the tools that they need so they can flourish.
So how does Chance UK address the issues of exclusions and the rise in mental health problems that we're seeing amongst children?
Yeah, I mean, it's so Chance UK see all of these issues, exclusions, mental health, behavioural difficulties. All of these tend to be symptoms of other things. This is not, if you just try and tackle the presenting issue, what you're doing is coming at the problem from an educational angle, or you're saying, very understandably, the GP is looking at it from a health angle, social services is looking at it from a safeguarding angle. Chance UK come in and say, what is this kid's childhood like? And how do we give it back to them? Because you only get one chance to get childhood right. And it is an absolutely crucial period of time between being, being a baby and turning into the adult that you're going to be with for the rest of your life. And if we can support children during that stage so that their childhood becomes a place of safety where they can learn, grow and develop, but we need to focus it back on the whole child, which means that yes, it's important they attend school, and yes, it's important that they get diagnosis and treatment for if they have a medical condition, but they are not their medical condition. They are not their school attendance. They are that individual child, and that's who we work with.
And I think it's seeing the behaviour, as a symptom, not as the problem in itself that needs to be fixed. It's what is causing that behaviour? What is the root behind that?
So we have we had a call from one of our families where the lad had got excluded, temporarily excluded. I spoke to the headmaster, and the headmaster said, "Oh, it's absolutely standard. It's a 2-day exclusion. He stole from school, and anyone who steals from school gets a 2-day exclusion." And knowing this family, I just asked a few more questions, and it turns out he got caught having stolen an apple from the canteen. And so I asked a few more questions, and I spoke to the family, and it turns out that the reason he got caught is because he didn't eat the apple. He didn't take the apple because he was hungry. He took the apple because there's not enough money at home to feed everyone, and he's worried about his mum not eating. It's 7. And this is, when we talk about understanding childhood, we need to appreciate as adults that children see, understand and misunderstand an awful lot of what's going on around them. And we are presenting them with a highly complex world. And we need to give them the tools that they need to help navigate that. In this case, giving this lad a 2-day temporary exclusion is totally disproportionate because they are sending him home to a house that can't afford to feed him. That's a much bigger punishment than sending a different child home for stealing. And that's what we're asking for. We're saying the systems and processes around children need to understand the child.
And it's measuring all people against the same metrics and also treating them as adults without understanding any of the reasons behind their behaviour. In the panel that I attended that Chance UK held about exclusions, I remember one of the head teachers saying that they looked at the root cause. They understood. They didn't take behaviour at face value.
Absolutely. And there's some really simple things that school does. And one of the really simple things they do, which is if a child is acting out, as we used to say in class, then in most schools, what they'll do is they'll call for another member of staff to come in. That senior member of staff will come and remove the child who's misbehaving and take them to a isolation area or however approach that. At this school, what happens is they call a senior member of staff. The senior member of staff will take the whole class for a little while, whilst the teacher steps out the room with that child and says, "I can see that something's going wrong for you right now, and I am still here for you." And there's something here about being very clear to these children that they belong. Because as soon as you're starting to hear 6, 7, 8-year-olds say, "There's something wrong with me, I'm broken, I've already messed up my life," then we know that they are feeling like they don't have a place. It's the most common thing for children to feel. They feel alone, they feel isolated, and that is root for crisis later on.
I actually read some statistics around isolation and loneliness in children. And I think they're from a long time ago. They're from 2018, but it was in 2018, 11.3% of 10 to 15-year-olds in the UK reported often feeling lonely, rising to 19.5% of children living in a city and 27.5% of children on free school meals. And that was in 2018, so before the pandemic.
And, you know, if you look at the latest stats around mental ill health amongst children, we know, I mean, it works out on average in every classroom, there's around about 5 children who have a diagnosable mental health condition. And that's in every classroom, in every school across the country. And that's not just those kids that are a little bit anxious. These are diagnosable conditions. That's an impossible situation for most teachers to handle. But if you come back and talk to those kids, most of them, despite the fact that there are 5 kids around them somewhere, most of them feel like they are the first and that they are alone and they don't know what to do. And what they need is to build a trusted adult relationship where someone can step in and say, to validate. I mean, it's become almost like one of these trendy words, validating people's emotions. And I challenge myself to say, how would you explain this to one of the kids that you support? You know, I'm here to validate your emotions. And they're like, I don't know what you mean. So when I was talking to one of the girls that we support, who's 11, I just said, look, what you feel is real and it matters to me. And she said that no one had ever said that to her before, because normally she'll say how she feels. I feel upset, and they'll try and cheer her up. Or I feel lonely, and they'll say, you don't need to be lonely because you're surrounded by people. And actually just saying, no, it's real for you. That feeling is real, but there are ways to feel better. Is a really important lesson. A lot of us will, hopefully, I wish, will sail through life never needing to have to really work to understand and recognise and label those feelings. But this generation, more than ever before, we need to give them help to name those emotions and know what to do about them. Because there's some really simple stuff that we can do that helps to manage those emotions. It's not about just trying to make people happier. It's about trying to give them the tools so they can express how they feel and use those tools, because we're all going to face challenging situations in life.
It's acknowledging where they are and helping them to get through the experience.
We talk a lot about meeting the child where they are. And this is about very much appreciating that a child's experiences may not have the same impact on them as what we are assuming. And the classic is, we have children living in really very straitened financial circumstances where families are struggling. And yet, that's not the biggest issue in that child's life. The biggest issue for that child might be they're struggling with a friendship group, or they're experiencing body dysmorphia, or they're trying to put some control into their life by controlling food intake. There are 1,000,001 presentations that we see. What's incredibly important is that we don't, as the adults, say, well, your problem is. That's what happens with the diagnosis. We'll have children arrive with a diagnosis of autism or ADHD, but for them, the problem is not that they have autism. The problem is they want to make a friend, but they don't know how. And if you actually meet that need, then that is the solution. That's how you help them get through life well. Meeting a need by offering medication may assist, but it doesn't actually solve the issue the child is wrestling with.
It's like putting a plaster on a wound without helping heal.
If we build on that, it's what we do at Chance UK is we look at the wound and we say, wow, you know what? A plaster's not going to fix that. We're going to need some butterfly strips. And I'm going to show you how to put them on. I'll put on the first one, and then I'm going to show you how to do it, and then you're going to do the rest. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to be with you whilst you patch yourself up, because next time you'll be able to do it yourself.
So yeah, I wanted to ask how Chance UK addresses this growing mental health crisis amongst children, and how do they address the individual needs of each child?
So mentoring is a really interesting approach. to tackling issues, because there are no magic wands, and it's not like being a doctor where you can diagnose a problem. There's a huge amount of research that's been put in place to treat that medical issue. What we do have at Chance UK is 30 years worth of evidence base. We have been absolutely committed to try things, do the research, find what works, and do more of that. So what works with children who are having difficulties? Firstly, it's about response time. Early intervention is only early intervention if it's early. And I know that sounds blindingly obvious, but when you have waiting lists for specialist input from the children and adolescent mental health teams of up to 3 years, then early intervention for us. So at the moment, we have children who, if they're referred into us for whatever reason, then we will match them with a youth worker. I mean, it changes month to month, but at the moment it's around about 9 days before they will meet their youth worker. And what that is doing straight away is, if a child is brave enough to actually say, I think I might need some help, then making them wait is another form of punishment, and it destroys their hope. Whereas if you can respond and say, we're here, we're going to start, it's not going to be fast, solutions aren't instant, but we are here and we're working alongside you straight away, then that does something. And the other thing you can't wait for is a diagnosis. A lot of the children we see will end up with some sort of diagnosis of special educational need or disability. But if we wait for that diagnosis, again, months, years, then what we're embedding is behaviour that's unhelpful, a need that's unmet. So what mentoring does is it walks alongside that child. It's not about providing specialist medical input or being their social worker or being their teacher. It's more important than that. It's about saying, you deserve your childhood back, and I'm alongside you to help you find what is it you find challenging. Here's an array of tools that we can try. Let's find what works for you to help you. And then let's also find some joy. And it's about that where mentoring comes into its own. We especially trained youth workers. And again, that's about offering the child that consistency over 6 months, 9 months, up to a year in some cases. It's also trying to make sure that we meet the need that's presented. So we can go from there. Are some children who may not need that one-to-one, intensive one-to-one support, but there is something really important about the peer learning they can do within a group. So we'll run specialist groups, bringing people together for topics, especially girls who are struggling. Often they internalise those struggles. You may not see it in the classroom. These are often the children who are referred to us a bit later, referred to us because they may be self-harming in private. It's only just being picked up. And yeah, that's where the group work can really come into its own, because it's really important for these children to not feel alone.
Interesting, that's also the way that ADHD usually manifests in girls, which is why traditionally they weren't as diagnosed, because boys would be more outward with their emotions and girls just internalise, and so they might be the ones who are daydreaming in class. Or
absolutely. And that's about some of the structures and processes and systems that have grown up. And one of the things that always I talk about loving challenges a lot. And one of the things I always do a loving challenge about is the way we diagnose. It feels really certain, but most of the time, with most of these conditions, we are diagnosing based on set symptoms that may or may not be observable or testable. And alongside that, these are diagnoses that have only been around for a set amount of time. It is not that long ago, certainly within my daughter's lifetime, that children that we would now diagnose with autism were not diagnosed. Autism was not a diagnosis. Instead, we diagnosed the mother as a refrigerator mother was the term.
Oh my God.
Yeah, the mother had failed to show enough love for the child, and this had created a set of problems.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And let's go a bit further back, and there are plenty of things which are very normal expressions of humanness now that were previously crimes or mental health diagnoses. So what we need to actually understand is that if we look at everything through one lens, a health lens or a diagnosis lens, you miss what's most important. Because let's take my daughter, she lives with a disability. And I'm very lucky, she's brilliant and loving life. But she struggled when she was younger. And when she was struggling, if someone had just said, well, she's got a complex medical condition, we would treat that, and the distress we'll just have to ignore because that goes with the condition, that would have been a disaster for her. And we were lucky, we got the help we needed. And one of the things that we used to do together was to sit and read, because that's the girl she is. And we read one of the things that, she doesn't have as much time in her day as other kids. And so, but missing that bedtime book for her was like ripping off the plastic. It was a massive loss. So we always made time for that. And by understanding the child and meeting whatever need that child has, which will be personality and preference, and sometimes they want to be mischievous, that's good. That is helping them find themselves, because isn't that what childhood's supposed to be about? About exploring yourself, finding yourself. It's not about sit down, behave, fit within this box.
I love that when I talk to the youth workers about their different sessions. Like, it could be baking a cake, or playing football in the park, or going and having bubble tea, or it
all sounds like fun, but I will say there's a huge amount of professionalism behind that. So let's do the cake baking. One of our youth workers was doing brownie making yesterday, and but if I give you the science behind it, which is, the lad comes from a home where he witnessed a lot of domestic violence, and he has been kicking out at school physically, because that's his model of how to be a real man, is you use your physical power. And so our youth worker, who is, I'm quite short, but I think he's 6 foot, he's broad, he's a bloke. He decided to show this lad a different way of being a real man by baking and providing a cake for his mum, to take home for his mum to provide. But it's also, there was this, it's beautifully done. So one of the things that this lad had said when we started mentoring him is I've already made a mess of my life. That's what he said. And so our youth worker was laying out all the ingredients for this cake. And he's like, right, okay, I know none of these. And if you make cake, if you've ever baked, you'll know none of the ingredients look anything like cake. And then you start adding them together and it looks worse and worse. And what it did was give our youth worker a chance to say to this lad, I know it looks a mess now, but trust me, I have been here before, it turns out okay. And they put the cake in the oven and it baked, and it was lopsided and a little bit and slightly burnt. But it smelled amazing. And it's the first time he's ever baked something. And what that has done is built this relationship of trust. This lad trusts his youth worker because it was a mess, but his youth worker has been there before and it's turned out brilliant. And he's had something to take home as a gift for his mum. So on the surface, mentoring can look like many, many things, but there is huge social and emotional education. And we've worked with clinical psychologists to develop this program. It's absolutely robust. The thing is, the child does not feel like they are going through they don't feel like it's a school curriculum. And that's the point. It's a different way of learning.
And what changes do you see in the children from the beginning to after spending 9 months with a youth worker?
It's a really simple one, but it's probably so simple it may sound naive. What I see is hope. What I hear from the children is they were in a situation often when they didn't know it could get better. This is the only experiences they'd had, that life was difficult, that life was hard. And for the first time, they have found that things can be hard and then they can get better. And what we know about children and us and as adults is if you have hope and if you know that things can get better, then you can deal with almost anything, because it's about knowing that what works for you, that time will pass, that however we do, that there is help out there, that there are people you can trust, and that on the other side things can be fun again. It's really important. Hope is the root of a solution to many things.
And I know you spoke to me about studies that showed that not only does mentoring have immediate effects, but the skills that the children learn stay with them, and so studies have shown that there are long-term impacts.
I use the metaphor learning to drive, and because I don't know about you, when I learned to drive,
I failed my driving test 5 times.
Okay, some of us find it easier than others. I'm not a natural driver. Anyway, so I had my lessons. Bev, if you're out there somewhere, thank you so much for being so patient. And you get to the point, your driving instructor shows you everything and you learn the lessons, and then you pass your test. But you're not a good driver. You're good enough to pass a test, but you're still not, you're better than you were, but you're not a brilliant driver yet. And then if you go over the next 10 years, you are practicing those skills every day, the same skills, and you become a better and better and better driver. And still, 10 years later, if a cat runs out in front of you, you grab that wheel 10 to 2 and you do a perfect, emergency stop, just as you were taught. And that's exactly what we're doing. We are taking children at the earliest stage of need and saying, here are things that we will explore. We'll find out what works for you. We will give you those that guidance, those tools, that education. And okay, at the end of it, when we leave you in 9 months' time, you'll be better than you were. But you will have the tools to then use again and again and again, and it keeps working for you. So 10 years down the line, it has a bigger effect than immediately after the intervention. We are stopping problems happening in the future. We are helping the next generation of adults know what to do.
And I read a story about one of the mentees who said before she started mentoring, she didn't want to leave her bedroom.
Yeah.
And then with her mentee, they went and did different activities. And by the end, she felt a lot more comfortable out and about the house and was enjoying, learnt new hobbies.
Yeah.
Was a lot more excited about life.
Absolutely. It's a scary world out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a scary world for us. And we've all faced in recent times seeing things on the streets, on the phones that live in our pockets now, whether that's locally or whether that's abroad. We see things that decades ago would have just gone past without us noticing. It can feel a really scary place, and we will walk alongside a child to show them how to live within that world. And that's not ignoring the fear, it's not ignoring the emotion that goes with that, but it is about building your safe environment. But the girl, we didn't get her back to school. So, some people see that as a failure. We did get her to a local library, and she has now worked her way through the entire children's section, and is in regular correspondence with the librarian. So she'll go along to the library and chat with the librarian for an hour to get recommendations for adult reads. Now, is that a success? Yeah, it is. Because where she is now is she didn't believe she would ever be able to do this. So she's not quite ready to go back to school, but she believes she will be. And that's the difference. That's where we come back to hope. She has found where she belongs in this local, safe room full of books, and a book nerd to talk to. We all need our tribe. We all need to feel like we belong somewhere, that we are valued, that we are part of something. And that looks different for different people.
So on that, how do you think that loneliness affects children's development and behaviour? The feeling that they don't feel part of something.
It's catastrophic. Because there are two sides to it. There are children who are when I say actually lonely, what I mean is there isn't anyone in their lives that they feel they have got a close relationship to. That does happen. What's much more common is that as children begin to face the emotions that come with child development, it's new. Those emotions, they've never had them before, and they feel very alone with them. Loneliness is many things. It's an emotion, and it's a word that we give to an emotion that is around a sense of isolation. But when children are using it, what they're describing is that they feel that there is nowhere that they can take all of the emotions that they're feeling. It's hardly a surprise it comes out in behaviour when children are feeling that isolated and lonely. And it doesn't matter what makes them feel alone, whether that is mental ill health, whether that is the girl who we supported, who kept being punished at school for wearing trainers, but that's because there's not enough money at home to buy 2 pairs of shoes. So when her mum's at work, mum wears the school shoes. And she felt very alone. She didn't feel able to share that because it's embarrassing. Or whether we have a medical condition that feels quite isolating. Feeling different, feeling alone is, we know has terrible health outcomes. I mean, in adults, we know that it's equivalent to heavy smoking in terms of your life expectancy. If you do it with children, children cannot develop well if they feel isolated and alone, which is why for us at Chance UK, that sense of belonging is at the absolute core of the strategy we're developing now, because this is a place where they can come and find themselves as well as find others like them, to know that they are not alone, to know that those feelings are perfectly normal, and we don't need to be scared of the difficult feelings as well as the happy ones. It's not about ignoring them, it's about recognizing them, validating them, and finding ways to cope with them.
So how does Chance help build a sense of community amongst families and children?
It's a really interesting one. I think it's something that we are working on and we will have to continue to work on, because some of it is incredibly instinctual, as it should be. So one of the things I talk about is that we try and be really human. When a child arrives with us and starts their mentoring journey, the most important thing we do in those first 3 months is build a relationship of trust. It's done in many different ways. We work with the individual child to do it, but a trusting relationship, if a child doesn't have one, is absolutely crucial, and that in itself can be 90% of the solution to some of the issues that child has faced.
And it's interesting because when we feel more isolated and alone, that reduces our sense of trust with the world around us.
Absolutely.
We become more fearful.
Absolutely.
And perceive people to be a threat.
Yeah. And when we do trust people, we are able to do radical things, like ask for the support we need, because we have the language around what we're feeling. We know ourselves so that we are able to identify what it is we need, and we trust people to actually be able to say, I need a bit of help. And I think that's something that I try and do very openly here within Chance UK with every member of staff. There is something really important about saying it's okay at any stage of life. It doesn't matter what it could be, because different people struggle with different things on different days. As a community, as the Chance community, we are here to support each other because we all take turns. And that's one of the things that we teach the kids as well, that yes, we are supporting them, but actually their experience can help others too. And it's one of the powers of the targeted groups, of one child hearing another child say, yeah, I've felt that, and that's really hard. Again, knowing they're not alone.
And I know that you also support families, because there's been studies showing that the more a family is involved and the better the outcomes for the child. Also parents are struggling too. Could you tell me a bit about how you support, how Chance UK supports families?
So Chance UK will support a family on a similar journey to the child's one-to-one journey. So the youth worker will support the child, and that is their own individual journey and own individual path. But at the same time, we'll have family support workers going in to support the families of those children. And again, it's a very similar model, which is don't tackle the problem that you've been told about or they've been referred for. You go in to see what is it that we could do to support that individual family. What is it that they need? And I think a really good example of that, would be one of the families that we were working with. They'd been rehoused, which was brilliant because of the needs of the family. There were quite high levels of disability. They'd been given an accessible property. But one of the things that wasn't known by the local council is that there was very loud music pollution from next door. Next door neighbour was a drummer. Yeah. We've all been there. We've all been there where, the neighbours is slightly problematic. If you've got kids that can't sleep, and when they don't sleep, it becomes a very chaotic household, then that turns what could be an inconvenience into a crisis. But that parent, in that case, it would be very rare for that parent to be phoning the council and complaining. She was too busy looking after her kids. So there was things that we can do and work with that parent to help her address the priority for her life.
And I wanted to ask you a bit about the referral process.
Yeah. How
do children and families get referred to Chance UK, and where do you see the majority of referrals coming from?
It is shifting, actually. It's been really interesting to watch that shift. So we get around about half of our referrals now come from social care. Okay. And a lot of that is because other statutory services are so full that social care can't refer into them. So they're referring to us. And then around about 40% comes from education. It might be teachers, Senkos, office admin staff. They're brilliant. Dinner ladies. I know they're not called that anymore. Lunchtime monitors. I've always said that I don't know where we'd be without lunchtime monitors. But also parents themselves or families themselves can refer in. Go to Chance UK's website. There is a simple referral process on there. If you have a child who you think is in need, you think there may be an issue, I don't mind. I don't need a diagnosis. I don't need there to be something really, really specifically going wrong in their lives. It's the earliest point of need. So if you have a child at the earliest point of need in the wider London area, then hopefully we can help.
Because at the moment, Chance operates in 9 London boroughs.
We'll operate across London.
Okay.
So, we would hope to do more in the future. And in the meantime, we will always, if there's a family struggling, we spoke to a family in Hull the other day and try to find them some services more locally to them, which would be more appropriate. But yeah, we are looking to see if there are ways to do more.
And what are the future goals and plans for Chance UK?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's a big one. What we know is that every single child needs help with the growing up bit. Childhood is hard. It's always been hard. Growing up has always been hard. So every child out there needs some help. And I think what we're really interested in exploring at Chance UK is how do we use our learning and insights from the mentoring we do with the children, the one-to-one, to try and build a wider understanding of using those techniques to just support more children. Because a lot of children may only need a little bit. They may only need a little bit of sort of nudging in the right direction around emotional and social learning. And if there was one thing I was telling people out there is talk emotions to your kids. Give them the labels. They don't even have to be the proper labels. My daughter ended up needing 15 different words for feeling tired because she felt tired all the time, which involved different responses. So, if she's oof, that means she wants to lie down on a sofa and watch TV and just, and be fed snacks. Whereas weary means she is desperate to get to her bed. And sometimes you will need to work with children to understand and label a feeling. That doesn't happen automatically. We don't teach that in schools. So yeah, if there's one thing, and that's something that I'd love to be Chance UK to be out there doing, is speaking up for children, representing those issues at a national level, so that far more people are seeing the problems, but also offering these really practical, actionable solutions, things that families, professionals, and kids can do, because we can't just say it's a crisis. We can't just say it's a problem. We owe these kids a chance to have a good childhood.
Mm-hmm. And what can listeners do to support Chance UK in its mission?
Well, sign up, follow us on social media, because you never know when you may come across someone in your family, a child in your life, a friend's child who may need us. So stay in touch. Support our campaigning. So we are campaigning at the moment. It's around exclusion, but we'll be campaigning about other things. You could do that find out more through our website. Refer children if you think that we can help, and if we can't, we'll do our damnedest to try and find what we can do. And this work costs money, it's hard to ask for money sometimes. We know it's not an easy time, but these are the children that are making the society we all live in. So if you would like to make a donation, then you can do that on our website as well.
And they are the future.
Literally.
We need to invest in the youngest generation, because they are the future of this country and of the world that we live in.
And we have a choice.
Yeah.
We have a choice about the society we want. Do we want to invest at the point of earliest need and grow communities that flourish? Or do we want to face constant crisis? It is a choice.
I think early development is so crucial to someone's overall development. And when you say earliest need, you don't just mean age, you mean before something becomes a crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, we see Chance UK will see children from age 5 up to age 13, 14. Yeah. What's important is about what their need is, and trying to get in there as soon as a child starts to see difficulties, because there are children who are pottering along fine. We had a referral the other day of a child who'd been doing okay at school, okay at home, and they've had a bereavement in the family, and the entire family has crumbled. Now, there is a child who is now at very high need, but this is the earliest point it could have been identified. That's when we step in. You don't make a child wait to get worse. That's the important thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we usually end this podcast on 2 questions.
Okay.
So the first question is, when did you last feel a sense of belonging?
I see. I sort of half knew this question was coming, and I had a planned answer, and now I'm going to change it because I'm going to be incredibly honest. So last night, I went out with my specific other, and we went to the British Library, because we are both a bit nerdy, and we were looking through the collection of stamps they have. I'm not a stamp collector, but there was a chap there who was also looking, and had the whole classic English gent look. There was the bow tie, there were the patches on his tweed jacket, and I must have chatted with him for about 40 minutes about his interest in stamps. And it wasn't that I'm fascinated by stamps. It was that this guy had a passion in his life, and I felt like I was part of his community for that time of talking to him, and it was an absolute privilege to talk to him.
Lovely. The British Library has some really great events on at the moment.
Definitely worth a trip if anyone hasn't been there.
Okay, and final question: what advice would you give someone to help them feel more connected? We could change this as well to help a child feel more connected too.
I think this applies to children and grown-ups, which is sometimes it feels really scary to tell people what's actually happening inside your head. But as a human race, we've not yet developed mind reading. And what we learn hopefully learn as children is the only way to connect is to be honest and as open as you can be, and take time and keep asking, because you won't find your tribe straight away, but they are out there. It's where the internet has been brilliant. Whatever your niche interest in life, there are people out there that will love it too. So keep asking, keep connecting, never give up, because there are people out there that will find you absolutely fascinating, and they'll be your mates for life.
Thank you so much. That was lovely.